Welcome back to We're Open. Today's guest was one of our most requested for their role as a creative director of Free Realms. Let's get started. Hey, Laralyn, thanks so much for joining us. Jumping into it, what was your role as a creative director?
In the beginning, there was a team of probably 8 or 10 designers, including me. And so I was really hands-on in helping develop the initial systems and content that went into the game, partnering closely with programming and the art director. By the time we launched, my design team was a little over 50 people. It was epically huge. Now, AAA teams often get to that size. So at that point, I was 100% management of that team. I was playing the game and giving them feedback and looking at their concepts.
What was the initial vision of Free Realms and how did it change over time?
At that point, there were really no free-to-play games for kids outside of MapleStory and RuneScape. Jen Smedley's original vision was a higher quality game intentionally made so parents could play with their kids. I was brought aboard to start in a new direction, but what was important to me from a vision perspective was that it was a game that you could play in whatever way you wanted, and that it feels like it was a game that was made for you. One of the key decisions that I made early on was that combat was optional. You had to opt in. Otherwise, we're forcing a play style on you. Later, they made it not optional. The other goal that we had was pre-mobile games. Women and girls were probably 20% of the gaming audience. We wanted 50-50. And so we were very intentional about creating activities, wearables, and assets that were open to anybody. That was at the foundation of Free Realms. People think the name Free Realms came from it being free to play, but it actually came from being free to be who you are. We ended up with 51% boys and 49% girls, which was amazing in the time period.
Those are great numbers. How did players influence the game?
After we launched, we spent the first probably 8 months trying to work on certain parts of the game that weren't performing well, then refining our metrics so that we could better understand what people were doing. We noticed that players were not leveling up at the rate that we expected. Everybody started at the same location. Players around level 3 started to get things they really liked. And so they were going back to the starting area with their cool clothes and their pets and just hanging out and talking and dancing. And so we ended up making a rentable party space. Understanding what players do should change what's in the game. And it very much did.
Partying was definitely a popular activity. Is there anything you would have liked to have seen in game?
SOE had one big gathering of the company a year. It took us 3 of those to get Free Realms out the door. The very first one, we did a presentation that included playing a mini game as you fell down this long hole into the center of the earth. When you landed, you were in the underworld. It was a world of Mexican Day of the Dead, and it would have been the perfect place to roll out Party Planner as a job. And I had wanted before launch to make Party Planner an actual job. Socialization was the one thing that didn't let you level up.
Ooh, that would have been cool to see. Did you find it easy to cater to kids' games like Free Realms?
So I had just come off making my second game for kids. I've made more non-kids games than kids games, but I already had to learn that I was not the audience. But it was interesting because the initial Free Realms design team were fantastic designers, but they had spent pretty much their whole career making EverQuest. And so they were going down this traditional route of you have stats like strength and dexterity. And I remember having conversations with them around things like, what does strength do? And they would tell me it determines what weapons you can equip and how much damage you do. Then just tell me how much damage I do. In Free Realms, you don't have to use a calculator to figure out what pair of pants to put on. But then what was a big adjustment for me, I have made what are called AAA games for almost all of my career, which are the big budget, high profile console games. I played MapleStory and I played RuneScape because those games were really, really, really popular. I actually came back to my team and said, you know what, we need to play these until we understand why people like them. So that was my mental shift, was understanding that not everything has to be at AAA level of quality, which most of what we shipped in Free Realms ended up being that. But what was really important was that what you made was what your players actually wanted to play.
With your career background, are you still able to immerse yourself in video games?
I notice when they do things really well or really not well, but I don't really break it down very often. I want to play it like a player.
I'm glad to hear it. What would you say is your proudest achievement in Free Realms?
If you had asked me 5 5 years ago. I had to really fight for pets that were intelligent and could learn, and you taught them tricks and they reacted to things in the world. That's really difficult to do and sometimes performance intensive. At least it was then. A lot of younger kids only had the menu chat system. They needed someone to bond with. So that's what I would have said. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've had people reach out to me to say how important Free Roams was to them, how much it meant to them to have a place where they could be themselves when they were struggling with being bullied for who they were. I wanted you to be free to be who you were. And the fact that for some people it actually was that, it really just means the world to me.
It must be such an honor to see your impact continuing. What have you been up to since Free Roams?
After Free Roams, I stayed with Sony Online and they wanted to start a Facebook game. I led the efforts in San Diego, which was SOE's home. Ended up moving to San Francisco and working for a company called iWin on casual games. But then I had a bout of stage 4 cancer, and that really changed me. I went back to Los Angeles and took a job as chief creative officer at a little developer called The Workshop. They were later acquired by Skydance, the film company. I had a second cancer while I was there. Ended up coming to the Seattle area where I live now, working for Microsoft.
I appreciate you being so open about your journey. You moved around a lot.
Like 10 years ago, there were probably 6 creative director job openings in the entire world. They tended to hire from within. At a company with any prestige or games I wanted to work on, I pretty much had to move. I'm probably going to retire from Microsoft in the next 6 months or so to make my own games as an indie developer.
Well, congratulations pre-retirement. You've been very vocal on this topic, so I want to ask, what cultural shifts have you seen for women in the gaming industry?
Around 1994, I started by making my own company, but then our game got canceled. I ended up working for an actual company that I did not own. I think they had like 120 people. There were 3 women and 1 was HR. That trend really continued for the first 10 years of my career. Even before Gamergate, I felt like somehow things had changed. Before, it was an assumption that everyone's a man. And so everything was planned for man things. But then things changed. And if women said, hey, how about we don't meet at the strip club? Suddenly it was us being a problem and saying that. We lost a lot of women from game development. And still women leave game development much earlier and more frequently than men do. But women and people who identify as women. If you have a bunch of people from different backgrounds and different experiences, they're more likely to contribute unique ideas. That, I think, is somewhere that we are much better now.
Thank you for all your advocacy work. That can't always be easy.
When I had my first cancer, I made a promise to myself. From then on, I was going to be the person who stands up no matter how hard it is.
Please keep doing what you're doing. Shifting gears, what do you think of Free Roam Sunrise?
As a creative director, I create intellectual property, IP, and I'm a lawyer. All of that kind of combines to, if Daybreak gave permission, I would absolutely play it. If it's done without permission, that's more challenging for me. If you know about someone using it and you let them use it without asking them to stop, you can lose the rights to your IP. Typically, a company a lot of times won't decide to do that until it is playable live.
It's important to bring up these concerns, especially with your insight. Before we go, do you have a favorite memory of Free Roams?
Free Roams launched at probably like 11:45 at night. We all have to monitor the servers and make sure they don't fall down because there were players waiting. That was what was most exciting for us. We have like 2,000 people logged in, which is not huge for an MMO, but still 2,000 people were that eager to get in at midnight. A group of the lead designers working with me, we opened champagne and had a little party. After crunching for a year and working so hard on it and knowing like literally every ounce of the game, they still stayed at 1 a.m. to go back in and play. I had 2 characters. One I played when I really wanted to just play the game. Her name was Marion. But then I had a character called Laralyn that had admin rights and could actually do stuff in the game world. I made the mistake of logging in with Laralyn. My intent was to go in the world up to the designers who were in the game and say, go to bed. Players recognized me because I'd done so many interviews. Now they're wanting to celebrate. So I ended up staying till 3 a.m. Having that first night was just so perfect for all of the work and hope and effort that we put into it.
Such a wonderful story. Thank you so much for covering such an array of topics with us.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. I always love talking about Free Roams.
A huge thanks to Laralyn for joining us. Our next guest is known for their music videos and fairly recently uploaded all their content. Subscribe to see who.